Hi, my name is Daniel Lane, and I'm doing my report on the book The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down: Among Child, Her American Doctors, and the Collision of Two Cultures. Again, I'm sitting here in my camper in North Dakota with no internet, so I have to do this on my phone and then drive into town and upload it. So here we go. The first question, what is the book about? The briefest story, the briefest summary of the storyline. Well, the book is about a Hmong family that came to the U.S. to escape tyranny. Back and around Laos, they were completely mistreated, and really the neighboring cultures around them tried to basically convert them or bring them to extinction. And so they ended up coming to America through a long series of events. Upon coming, Leah, or Laya, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, the Lee's daughter, the Hmong's family's daughter, is knocked down by her sister, and shortly after she begins to have seizures. That is where the title of the book comes from, The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down. It's actually a picture of her getting caught up in these epileptic fits or seizures. So from there, once she begins having the seizures, her parents bring her to MCMC, which is the hospital there in Merced, California. This is where they're at. And apparently, the Hmong are very into medicine, and they use like a witch doctor called the Twix-Neeb, and their practices of medicine is very different than the Merced hospitals, and so they kind of have a very hard time with the doctors at MCMC and their use of medicine. So there's this huge cultural clash with the use of medicine, and then the language barrier to boot. They have no idea what the doctors are trying to tell them. Why are they doing what they're doing? Why is there IVs in their daughter? They've never seen IVs before. They've never been in a building like the hospital. They're completely in culture shock, out of their element. An interesting thing about the Twix-Neeb is apparently in their history, Twix-Neebs at some point had seizures as well. So while the Hmong and this particular family, the Lees, are viewing Leah's seizures as somewhat of some kind of spiritual endowment or enlightenment from the spirit world, because this is kind of the preface for her becoming possibly a Twix-Neeb, the doctors at MCMC can see it completely different. They see it as, man, we got to stop these at all costs or this child will die. So there's this huge cultural clash with even spirituality and religion for the Hmong, and MCMC is completely oblivious to this until later on when their primary caregivers begin to do research on the Hmong and they find out a lot more information about them. Some more cultural elements which are important to understand. Well, that's probably good because I've almost got 5 minutes on number one. Number two, the symbols in the book and how they are important to what you are learning in the class. I think as far as symbols go, the Hmong have a lot of symbols in regards to medicine and spirituality, the herbs they use, the sacrifices to animals to appease spirits or to call the patient's spirit back to their body. Some of the symbols would be also the clothing that they wear. For marriage, they get in some very kind of ceremonial type dresses. On Leah's birthday, her mother, Fua, I guess is how you pronounce Fua, being the mother, Now Cow being the father. Apparently, on her birthday, she dressed Leah up really beautifully in this ceremonial type dress that was very symbolic of like a princess and royalty. And her having siblings, everybody's kind of aware by the treatment that Leah's receiving from her parents that she's kind of the favored child. And how their parents treat her is symbolic of that. Okay, moving on, because I'm running out of time. 3. What is the value of this book to class learning how to communicate cross-culturally? Okay, so the value of the book to a class that's learning to communicate cross-culturally is profound, really. For starters, we see the challenges in communication with the Hmong and how they do not know how to speak English, and that their vocabulary is much different from American vocabulary. So not only do they not know how to speak English, and the English folks, the doctors at MCMC, do not know how to speak Hmong, their selection of words is tremendously different from American language. For example, they're kind of an agrarian culture, and so they have phrases like the sound that the leaves make, like that's a phrase they use, or the sound of trees falling, or the sound of trees on fire, or there was all these different phrases in the book of things that they would say as their normal language that we would be like, what? So not only is there a massive language barrier in the fact that these two cultures can't speak each other's language, even the words themselves that they would use, we don't really have equivalents in a lot of ways. So the communication barrier was massive. And this book painted a picture of how important it is to learn the history and, their past, to figure out how to reach them, how to communicate to them, how to get past all these cultural barriers to try to have dialogue, to try to make sense of these two worlds colliding. And yeah. It's also very apparent that the Hmong and Americans have completely different worldviews. Again, the Hmong are an agrarian tribe from the mountains near Laos, and they lived in huts and dirt floors. They've never seen toilets before. They've never seen technology. Some of them saw a little bit of technology when they were drafted into the war, which was dubbed the Quiet War. But most of the Hmong have never seen American technology. So coming over here, they would wash stuff in the toilet, and they would use the facilities in the homes in ways that they weren't designed to be used. One family in the book poured out potting soil in the living room and began to grow crops in the living room with like a foot of potting soil on the living room floor. In an upstairs apartment, began watering it, and water would seep down through the floor of the upstairs apartment, through the ceiling of the downstairs apartment, and get the downstairs apartment where a different family, and in the book it was a white family, I believe, would get their stuff wet. You know, I mean, they just didn't have the concepts at all as to the technology that we use or anything like that. So reading this book, it kind of opens your eyes as to, wow, people don't know what a toilet is, really? Or, you know, they don't know what a flashlight is, or you're really going to try to grow crops on a floor that's made out of wood that's above another family? Like, they just don't understand, like, even engineering and just basic fundamental things that Americans, we take for granted as, you know, for knowing. Past my time here. Number 4, what aspects of this book mirror, enhance, or contradict what you are learning in the class? Well, I think this book was an excellent choice of literature to complement what we are learning in the text and in the class. The book was filled, with cross-cultural incompetence from both the Hmong and the whites. It also showed the importance of becoming a student to a culture that you're trying to communicate with cross-culturally, to really humble yourself and do the history research, do some R&D, really learn about the culture that you're trying to communicate with. I mean, had the doctors understood, the history of the Hmong coming into this, which it's kind of hard to know the history of every culture, but had they, this book would have had a completely different twist on it and a series of events. And possibly Leah may have been saved. She may not have ended up dying with, no brain activity. So, I think the main kind of umbrella lesson that coincides with the book and the text is this idea of really becoming a humble student of the culture that you're attempting to cross-communicate and cross-pollinize and cross-communicate with, and really learn, their history, what they're about, what's important to them. Remain open-minded to better serve them, really. I think that's what it comes down to, is how can I serve this culture and put my agenda on the back burner. And I think the best way to serve a culture, according to, I think, the text and this book, is to really learn their history and learn their language the best you can, and try to understand where they're coming from, why they do what they do. Their religious practices are going to be paramount to learn, because, people die for their religion. So to learn their religious practices is a huge deal, and to really just become a good student of the culture. So I think that's it. I didn't really, it's kind of hard to sit here and hold my phone and do a really good live presentation, with props and stuff. I don't really have clothing that's Asian or Hmong, so this is the best I could kind of come up with. So thank you.